Good afternoon, and thank you for the opportunity to present my senior capstone project. I hope you enjoyed this presentation as much as I've enjoyed doing the research and compiling it into this presentation. Lastly, before we get started, thank you to Professor Sean Bowie for the prompt and detailed feedback throughout the semester that has gotten me to this point. My research examines how Oklahoma can maintain its nationally recognized firefighter certification standards while improving accessibility for firefighters throughout the state. Specifically, I explore how a hybrid certification delivery model could reduce barriers faced by rural and volunteer fire departments without compromising accreditation, quality, or public safety. The recommendations I present are intended to strengthen the existing system, not to replace it, by bringing training opportunities closer to the firefighters and communities that depend on them. Before discussing any changes, it is important to recognize that Oklahoma has already built a strong and nationally recognized certification system. Through the Oklahoma State Fire Marshal Commission and Oklahoma State University Fire Service Training, the state maintains centralized oversight and nationally accredited standards through both IFSAC, IFSAC, and ProBoard. Those standards provide consistency, accountability, interoperability, and confidence that firefighters across Oklahoma are being trained at the same high level. Because of that success, this project is not about lowering standards or replacing the current system. In fact, the current oversight structure should be viewed as a strength of the system. The goal is to protect that gold standard while modernizing how certification opportunities are delivered to the firefighters and communities that depend on them most. After recognizing the strengths of Oklahoma's certification system, we can now focus on the problem. The issue is not with the standards themselves. The issue is that a highly centralized delivery model is trying to serve a workforce that is spread across more than 900 fire departments and approximately 15,000 firefighters throughout the state of Oklahoma. In the fiscal year 2025 alone, nearly 5,000 courses were delivered to more than 44,000 emergency responders. At the same time, training personnel logged over 139,000 miles while attempting to support those statewide activities. These numbers demonstrate the growing pressure placed on a single delivery system. As the demand for training continues to increase, the current model creates logistical challenges for both instructors and the firefighters, especially those in rural communities, where most of our fire departments are. This creates a bottleneck, not because Oklahoma's standards are inadequate, but because the existing delivery structure was not designed to efficiently support such a geographically dispersed workforce. Those statewide demands create costs that extend far beyond tuition alone. For many firefighters, the real barriers to certification are the logistical burdens associated with obtaining it. As we examine the limitations of the current delivery system, it is important to remember who ultimately absorbs those costs. Across the country, approximately 65% of firefighters serve in volunteer capacities. Many in the rural communities. While the certification standards themselves are valuable, the burden of obtaining them often extends far beyond the course fee. Volunteers frequently face long travel distances, out-of-pocket expenses for fuel, lodging, and meals, and in many cases, must miss time from their primary civilian jobs, which cuts into their monthly budgets. The time commitment is also substantial. Oklahoma's Fire Training Advisory Commission, their standards require 72 hours for intermediate certification, and that certification is what is needed to go interior fire attack on any structural fire. So without the intermediate certification, many rural communities, if their volunteers do not have this, would be under serious danger with their firefighters not being able to go inside their structure that is on fire. 176 hours is what's needed for advanced certification, and 80 additional hours for a master certification. For a volunteer firefighter, every required hour may also mean additional miles traveled, lost wages, and time away from family and work. As a result of all of this, the challenge is not that firefighters are unwilling to pursue higher standards. That's not the case at all. The challenge is that the current delivery system places too much of the logistical burden on the individual. That leads to an important question. Are we really forced to choose between maintaining high standards and improving accessibility? Or is it that the choice itself is a false dilemma? At this point, it may seem that improving accessibility requires sacrificing quality. I would argue that this is a false choice. The standards themselves are not the problem. Oklahoma's certification requirements, practical evaluations, and national accreditations have created a system that deserves to be protected. What needs to change is not the standard, but the delivery mechanism. The what remains unchanged. Training remains rigorous, practical, and accredited. The how, however, can evolve. By using regional training sites, hybrid coursework, and modern technology, we can make certification more accessible without reducing expectations. In other words, accessibility and quality are not competing goals. They actually work together. The central argument of this proposal is simple. The issue is delivery, not standards. And we know this balance is achievable because other states have already demonstrated that broad accessibility and strong accreditation can exist at the same time. At this point, the question becomes whether modernization is simply an idea or whether it has already been proven. Our neighboring states have shown that broad accessibility and high standards are not mutually exclusive. States like Texas, Colorado, Missouri, and Arkansas all maintain centralized oversight and national accreditation through IFSAC and ProBoard standards, yet each state also utilizes regional testing centers and hybrid learning opportunities to improve access. For example, Texas, through the Texas Commission on Fire Protection and TEACS, trains more than 117,000 responders annually. Missouri maintains more than 44,000 active certifications. Neither state sacrificed quality to achieve their accessibility. The difference is not that they lowered standards. The difference is that they modernized how those standards are delivered. Oklahoma already possesses the same commitment to quality. The opportunity before us is to combine that commitment with a delivery system that better serves firefighters across the entire state. So if other states have shown this approach works, what would that look like in Oklahoma? The answer begins with rethinking the structure itself. If we know the standards are worth protecting, and we know other states have successfully modernized delivery, the next question becomes, what should it look like in Oklahoma? Currently, our system operates much like a hub and spoke model. Training resources and delivery are concentrated in one location, primarily Stillwater, Oklahoma, requiring firefighters from across the state to come to the standard. But modern networks do not operate that way. Instead, I propose a distributed network model. The State Fire Marshal and OSU Fire Service Training would remain the central authority responsible for standards and oversight, while regional partners would assist with delivering training and evaluations closer to the communities they serve. In other words, we are not moving away from the standard, we are moving the standard to the firefighters. By creating a connected statewide network, instead of relying on a single point of delivery, we can improve access, reduce travel burdens, and strengthen participation without sacrificing accountability or quality. The first step in building that network is creating strategically located regional certification and testing centers across Oklahoma. First recommendation is to establish regional certification and testing centers. Under this model, oversight remains centralized. The State Fire Marshal and OSU Fire Service Training would continue to maintain one rule book, one set of standards, and one testing process statewide that we already know works. What changes is simply where the testing occurs. Rather than requiring firefighters from every corner of Oklahoma to travel to a single location, authorized regional testing sites could deliver those evaluations closer to the communities that these firefighters serve. This approach preserves consistency while dramatically reducing travel time and departmental expenses. It also creates more opportunities for participation and removes many of the logistical challenges that rural volunteer fire departments currently face. Most importantly, regional delivery does not create multiple standards. This is still the one standard. There are simply multiple access points to that standard. However, reducing travel for testing addresses only part of the problem. We can further improve accessibility by separating what must be done in person from what can be delivered more flexibly. The second recommendation is to separate classroom learning from practical skill evaluations. Not every component of firefighter education requires the same method of delivery. The cognitive portions of training, such as fire dynamics, building construction, and safety principles, can be delivered through flexible, hybrid learning platforms. This allows volunteers to study around work schedules and family responsibilities rather than being forced to travel for every classroom hour. However, the practical side of firefighting must remain protected. These are the most important skills. Live fire evolutions, hands-on skills, and tactical evolutions should continue to be conducted in person under direct supervision. This proposal does not seek to digitize firefighting. It seeks to digitize the classroom portion while preserving the practical experience that develops competent firefighters. By separating what can be taught flexibly from what must be evaluated physically, we can dramatically improve accessibility without compromising the integrity of the profession. The good news is that Oklahoma does not have to build an entirely new system to accomplish this. Much of the infrastructure already exists. The third recommendation is to take advantage of infrastructure that already exists throughout Oklahoma. This proposal does not require building new campuses or creating entirely new organizations. Instead, it builds partnerships. OSU Fire Service Training would continue to provide oversight, curriculum, and quality control, while community colleges and technology centers could serve as regional hosts for classroom instruction and testing activities. These institutions already possess classrooms, administrative support systems, and established relationships within their communities. By leveraging existing resources rather than constructing new facilities, Oklahoma can expand access in a fiscally responsible way while maintaining centralized oversight and consistent standards. In other words, we are not proposing a new system. We keep reiterating that. We are proposing a better use of the system we already have. And because cost remains a major concern, the fourth recommendation focuses on providing targeted support to remove the financial barriers that still remain. This proposal does not require building new campuses or creating entirely new organizations. I want to reiterate that. We are not proposing a new system. We are proposing a better use of the system we already have. The final recommendation recognizes that accessibility challenges are not only geographic, they are also financial. Over the last 2 decades, state support for OSU fire service training has declined from roughly $2 million in 2007 to about $1.1 million today, despite serving approximately 15,000 firefighters. Rather than creating entirely new funding programs, Oklahoma can leverage existing state and federal resources. Recent SAFER grants demonstrate that targeted assistance is already available and can be directed towards rural and volunteer departments who simply don't have the funding like bigger cities do. Those resources can help cover travel expenses, lodging, and course fees that often prevent volunteers from pursuing certification. The goal is simple. No firefighter should have to choose between professional development and their personal finances. These grants would serve as a bridge, eliminating financial barriers while the distributed training network becomes fully operational. Of course, major reforms should not occur overnight. Any change of this magnitude should be introduced carefully, measured objectively, and expanded only after success has been demonstrated. One of the biggest concerns with any reform effort, is the fear of changing too much too quickly. That's why this proposal is intentionally designed as a phased process that prioritizes safety, accountability, and measurable results. Phase 1 focuses on planning. The Oklahoma Fire Service Training Commission, FTAC, and OSU Fire Service Training would work together to identify pilot regions and establish performance metrics. Phase 2 introduces limited pilot programs in selected areas. This allows regional testing and hybrid learning models to be evaluated on a small scale before any broader expansion. Phase 3 focuses on evaluation. Data from the pilots would be analyzed, processes refined, and any administrative issues corrected. Only after those results demonstrate success would Phase 4 begin, expanding the model statewide. The purpose with this is not to gamble with Oklahoma's fire service. It is to prove the concept first and scale only what works. Even with a careful rollout, legitimate concerns remain. Questions about quality, funding, and coordination must be addressed directly. Fortunately, each of those risks already has practical solutions. Any major change brings legitimate concerns, and those concerns deserve to be addressed directly. The first concern is standard degradation or the loss of accreditation. That risk is eliminated by protecting what matters most. Practical evaluations remain entirely in person, and oversight, testing procedures, and the rule book remain centralized under OSU Fire Service Training, just like they already are. A second concern is funding. Fortunately, this proposal does not require building new academies. By leveraging existing technology centers and community colleges, Oklahoma can expand access without major capital expenditures. The final concern is coordination. To prevent fragmentation, implementation would begin with mandatory collaboration between the Fire Service Training Commission, FTAC, and OSU Fire Service Training, followed by limited pilot programs before any statewide expansion. In other words, the risks are real, but they are manageable. By proactively addressing those challenges, Oklahoma can preserve the integrity of its standards while modernizing how those standards are delivered. If these reforms are successful, the results should be measurable. We should be able to evaluate whether accessibility has improved while maintaining the quality that firefighters and communities depend on. Ultimately, the success of this proposal should be judged by outcomes, not its intentions. First, we should expect to see a significant reduction in travel distance and costs for both firefighters and the training staff. Accessibility should improve because the system is being brought closer to the people it serves. Second, increased accessibility should translate into higher enrollment and certification completion rates, particularly among volunteer and rural departments that currently face the greatest barriers. Third, and most importantly, pass rates must remain stable. If certification outcomes decline, then the policy has failed. Maintaining competency and accreditation standards is non-negotiable. Finally, success should be reflected in the health of Oklahoma's fire service itself. Improved recruitment and retention would indicate that barriers to entry have been reduced and that departments are becoming more sustainable. In short, success is not simply about training more firefighters. Success means expanding access while maintaining the same level of quality and readiness that Oklahoma is known for. And that brings us back to the central message of this entire proposal. Throughout this presentation, I have argued that Oklahoma does not have a standards problem. It has an accessibility problem. The state has built a nationally recognized system that protects firefighters, promotes interoperability, and maintains accountability. Those standards should not be weakened or abandoned. However, the current delivery model places disproportionate burdens on rural and volunteer firefighters who make up the backbone of Oklahoma's fire service. The solution is not to lower expectations. The solution is to modernize how those expectations are delivered by utilizing regional testing centers, hybrid learning, existing educational infrastructure, and targeted financial support. Oklahoma can preserve the quality of its certifications while expanding access to those who need it most. Because standards protect firefighters, accessibility protects the communities, and Oklahoma should bring the standard to the firefighter, not force a firefighter to travel to the standard. Thank you.